Corporate scaling is subject to a specific kind of friction. As an organization adds headcount to accelerate its output, its operational velocity often slows down. This occurs because linear growth in employees creates an exponential increase in the number of communication pathways required to keep them aligned. A 5-person team has 10 distinct lines of communication to manage. At 50 people, those pathways jump to over 1,000. By the time an organization reaches 500, the sheer volume of coordination can consume the majority of a team's available energy. The standard response to this gridlock is to mandate better communication, creating cross-functional committees and adding layers of synchronization. Amazon reached a different conclusion. In a large organization, the need for cross-team communication is actually a structural defect. If the goal is to let builders build, the organization must actively work to eliminate the need for communication rather than encourage it. This isn't a problem humans can solve through better behavior. It requires engineering mechanisms that fundamentally remove the requirement to coordinate. Amazon faced the limits of this organizational physics during their rapid expansion in the late 90s. Between 1997 and 2001, revenue grew from $148 million to over $3.1 billion. As the company scaled, the pace of innovation began to stall. Leadership realized that exhorting overwhelmed teams to work harder or communicate better produced no measurable improvement in speed. Jeff Bezos pushed for a shift away from human effort and towards structural engineering. He codified the observation that good intentions don't work, mechanisms do. Within Amazon, a mechanism is defined as a hard structural constraint, a process designed to force a specific outcome without relying on individual willpower. To maintain velocity at scale, the company had to install these constraints across their software, their teams, and their hiring. One of the first mechanisms they had to dismantle was their own system for project approval, the New Project Initiatives Committee, or NPI. Pitching an idea through NPI was a high-friction process. Teams had to force rank their projects against the rest of the company, building speculative models to secure resources. This created a dependency tax. Because teams didn't own all the resources they needed, they were constantly forced to borrow engineers from other departments, slowing everyone down. The result was a culture of disempowered teams who no longer controlled their own operational roadmap. This organizational gridlock was a direct byproduct of a technical dependency. Amazon's website was powered by a single monolithic codebase named Obidos. Because the code was tightly coupled, any team trying to launch a new feature had to coordinate with dozens of other teams to ensure they didn't break the entire system. At the center of this monolith sat a shared database called ACB. This shared resource required a group of executive gatekeepers, the DB cabal, to manually review and approve every proposed change, which acted as a permanent brake on development. In this environment, every new hire added more complexity to the monolith, ensuring that growth eventually led to total gridlock. To regain speed, Amazon shattered this central bottleneck by moving to a service-oriented architecture. They established a new rule, encapsulation. Every service owns its own data and its own logic. No team is allowed to access another team's database or share their code. Communication between these isolated services happens exclusively through APIs, application programming interfaces. This architectural shift allows systems to interact automatically. It removes the need for human beings to coordinate technical details in meetings. Amazon then applied this same logic of decoupling to their organizational chart. This was the origin of the single-threaded leader. The foundational principle was that if you want to invent something new, you cannot make it someone's part-time job. These leaders manage 2 pizza teams, small, autonomous groups that own their projects from start to finish. Because the teams are decoupled from the rest of the company, they have total ownership over their technology and business results, free from cross-functional taxes. By decoupling the software through APIs and the leadership through single-threaded teams, Amazon removed the coordination tax, allowing the organization to scale its headcount without the usual decline in per-person output. However, high-velocity autonomous teams have a critical vulnerability. If an isolated team hires poorly, they will simply build the wrong things faster. Understaffed teams are often blinded by urgency bias, the systemic pressure to lower hiring standards just to fill a vacant seat and hit a deadline. Amazon's defense against this is a mechanism called the bar raiser. The bar raiser is not a set of HR guidelines. It is a hard structural veto embedded into the interview process. First, the mechanism replaces gut feelings with data. Interviewers are assigned specific behavioral principles and must use the STAR method to extract concrete examples of past performance. Second, the process requires detailed written feedback from every interviewer immediately after the meeting. Interviewers must submit their feedback and their vote before they are allowed to see anyone else's. This ensures that when the group eventually meets, the discussion is based on independent data points rather than early consensus or social pressure. To ensure objectivity, the bar raiser is always chosen from outside the hiring team. They don't feel the vacancy's immediate pain, making them immune to urgency. During the final debrief, the bar raiser has absolute veto power, able to override a hiring manager even if the team favors the candidate. By structurally separating hiring authority from the team needing a new hire, the organization protects its standards against the pressures of rapid growth. These mechanisms allow for high velocity, but those autonomous teams still need a shared strategic direction. This is provided by the OP1 planning process and S-team goals, top-down alignment mechanisms that serve as a directional compass. When these pieces work in concert, the engine is complete. Strategic alignment flows from the top, while execution is decoupled through APIs and single-threaded teams, and the input is guarded by bar raisers. You can write down your corporate culture, but that is merely an act of discovery. Enforcing that culture requires embedding it into the core operational processes of the company. Organizational scaling is an engineering discipline. Sustained velocity only happens when a company moves past good intentions and installs the hard mechanisms required to support its growth.